There we go. Welcome, everyone. It's so exciting to finally get to Vital Energy Series number 8. I can't believe we've been doing this literally for like the better part of the entire second half of the year, which is so crazy that it has moved that quickly. So, if you've been joining us about every other week now for several months to listen and tune into these series, we've been digging a rabbit hole. And a rabbit hole that we're going to really dive deep into today. Started talking about the five biological laws of nature all that time ago, and I've been giving hints and clues and insights into how we're going to dive into this. And so these are the big questions, right? These are the quote unquote symptoms or dis-ease that most individuals do have because this is a big common problem or a big common expression that a lot of us are experiencing throughout life at some point in our life where we know someone, we have a loved one, a family member, a friend. And so stay with us. If you haven't tuned in before, welcome. We're so grateful that you're here. We will post the replay within 24 hours, but I want you to know that some of this may be a little bit confusing today, but don't worry, we have all the other series lined up for you to tune into. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, but today we are diving in to the deep end on chronic long-term symptoms, chronic long-term dis-ease to open your mind, get rid of the fear, clean it out. No better time than now. So let's get started. If you haven't met me before, I am Dr. Kayla Abeid. I am a chiropractor, predominantly focused in prenatal women's health pediatrics, and I also have my postdoctoral certification in animal chiropractic. I don't currently practice chiropractic because I am in the process of selling a house and relocating and figuring out what is next for us in life. I did have a practice that we just recently closed after almost 7 years where I served this population. But for the past 5 years, I've actually been stay-at-home mom. My husband has run the office. I've gone in frequently, and I have really dove into the five biological laws of nature and worked from the virtual aspect and started an entire healing ministry online. So predominantly all of the knowledge, wisdom, and insight, and also learning and unlearning I've had to do through a lot of college years includes that, including my nutrition master's degree, human performance, exercise phys. Everybody says I've always lived a lot of different lives and had a lot of different jobs and careers, but they've all served for this purpose here. Everything we're going to talk about today, you've probably heard of before, and we're just going to shift it into a new lens. My entire purpose on this earth is always to guide people to self-healing, looking through biological adaptation, shifting our energetic being from believing that we are broken, less than, and unable to be fixed to shifting into we are whole. There is no mistakes in our creation, and we are able to look at what is going on and how we're adapting and make a conscious choice whether to ask for help, um, seek outside assistance for help, or trust with what's going on inside of us. And so I'm not against any type of other medical institution. I am pro allopathic medicine. I am pro Eastern medicine. I am pro holistic medicine, right? Because we're not saying this is better than everything else and that those things are awful. We are simply saying that they all intertwine together. And when we remove fear from the equation of sovereignty and how our body biologically adapts and responds, we can make really certain choices that we know what we need help with and how we're able to move forward without fear. So that is my intention here today. We are going to talk about symptoms, we're going to talk about disease, but I'm just sharing this with you because I'm not a medical doctor. I am a chiropractor, but I'm none of y'all's chiropractor. Could promise you that being all the way up here in Ohio. Not doing any chiropractic today. So I'm presenting this to you with an open mind and asking you to soak in this education and allow yourself to shift your perspective. A lot of people, when they come to these talks or they work with me through GNM, the biggest goal is always a perspective shift, to see something under a new guise or a new lens, or be able to see something that you weren't able to see before, because that's how our neurology and our brain works. We want to connect the conscious to the subconscious, and we're going to talk about more of that very soon here. So any point in time you have questions, drop them in the chat. I always like to save some time at the end so we could get a personalized question and answer session. If you don't get to it, I'll put my email in the chat and we could chat after that. So let's get started. Today we are totally changing the agenda. We typically do a little bit different of an agenda, but this is brand new because we are talking about a topic that is pretty huge and humongous and monstrosity. So actually we're just going to talk about decoding mystery illnesses, right? Because a lot of Today's diagnoses or disease or symptoms all stem around a lot of groups of different things that are clumped together. And so we're just going to start to break that away. And what we're going to look at is look at it through a lens of the biological laws and adaptation. And if you're new here, I'm going to give you a quick five short sentences of those biological laws for us to break down so that we could get to the meat and potatoes. And that is looking at the chronic loops of what we call Lyme, EBV, Fibro, autoimmune things, which are really, again, even in Western medicine, like subcategories or groups of symptoms that we are grouping together and putting an umbrella over. I'm going to also show you how to free your body from these cycles and free them from things starting up here. And that has to do with our education. That has to do with our belief system of how we look at our body's design and creation and how we look at the 5 biological laws of nature. I'm also going to share some personal support for vitality, specifically utilizing your own light for healing, which is so incredibly powerful. And for the past 2.5 years of the past 5 that I've been serving individuals in the GNM world, I've optimized utilizing this own light. And it has become so incredibly powerful that I just can't stop sharing about it. So if you don't get to stay on it all today, watch the replay and catch the very end. I know it will be well worth it. So let's get started. So let's go over the 5 biological laws of nature. Number 1. 5 biological laws of nature were discovered by Dr. Hammer, who was a German internal medicine doctor who, in short, experienced all of his patients experiencing some type of cancer, some type of long-term chronic illness, and he realized that there was a pattern, that most of these people, being a very hands-on, in-person, talking one-on-one with his patient's doctor, he realized that they all experienced a conflict a short time or a long time before the certain onset of symptoms. And so he then proceeded to have his own experience when his son was tragically shot and killed at a very young age, and he lost his child. And he then developed a very similar type of presentation of what we would call cancer in the Western world, and he realized that there's no way, shape, and form he ever had it, right? Because it didn't make sense. He was healthy. He knew how to prevent these things. He was a doctor. He knew what was going on. So he started looking even deeper into these categories of what happened to these subsets of people depending on what quote unquote specific type of cancer experience they were going through. And he determined and discovered the 5 biological laws of nature. And what it does is it simply explains how the body adapts to our environment, how our body adapts to our outside world. So within science, in the general world, in our modern world, we separate a lot of things. We separate our brain, our organs, regions. We talk about our mental health is separate from our physical health, right? But really, in truth, in science, everything is one. So the biological laws of nature all put all of these things together. You cannot separate me as a human being, as a psyche, as a brain, and an organ system, unless I am on the table flat and rigor mortis. It's not possible. So our body is working in conjunction with these 5 biological laws to adapt to our external world. And this applies in humans, it applies in animals, it applies in plants. So no matter, as long as you're a breathing, living entity, the 5 biological laws of nature are already at play. And that's the key here. Those of you that are new here tonight or have tuned in and are checking back in or watching this later, you don't have to do anything. No matter if you are only opting into holistic medicine, no matter if you're coming fresh from the allopathic world, no matter where you're coming from, these biological laws of nature are laws. They're not hypotheses, they're not theories. This is simple, straightforward. We just haven't been aware of them yet. And awareness is one of the biggest tools that will shift our entire trajectory of healing if we allow it to. Sorry, my children stretched my glasses and they're like falling off my face. So I have to keep pushing them up. So what we're going to do here today, my goal for you, is to keep an open mind, shift that perspective, and be aware of new things that you may have not ever heard of today, because that's what our brain is doing subconsciously. Our nervous system is looking for safety and awareness so it could file these situations in the back of the mind and remove fear from that frontal aspect of ourselves. So let's go through these really quickly. I love analogies if you don't know already, so put your seatbelt on, get ready. So the 5 biological laws of nature are quite extensive and pretty complex. I do teach a introductory course to this, so if this does pique your interest at any point in time, it's a passive course. You could opt in at any time. Just send me a message and I could get you the link for it. It is a 5-week program. So we're going to sum up this intro 5-week program into 5 sentences. So every symptom has a meaning. If you've ever had any type of symptom, from pain or a sore throat, or congestion like I'm experiencing in resolution right now, It's telling us something. It's not random. It's not there just by happenstance. We are adapting to something. That something happened and there's a response. And that means symptoms aren't bad. That actually means they are necessary. Because if you didn't know, you'll know now. Take this one thing away from you. We are wired for survival, everyone. We are not wired for like fancy things and fancy cars and fancy houses. Like that's modern day world. Primitively, our bodies are wired for survival because if we don't survive, we literally have nothing else. So we are no different than the deer in the headlights when it comes to how our body is wired and adapt. Yes, we do have wonderful modern advancements, but we want to look at ourselves primitively when we're looking at the biological laws. So with that, moving to number two, actually, you get the replay on my YouTube channel. I'll drop that link at the very end. Conflict trigger biological response programs. So if you have something that happens to you that's a conflict, it has to be completely shocking, completely unexpected. There's some specific criteria it has to follow in order for it to be considered a conflict, but for the most part, something that shocks you, something unexpected, something that you couldn't pre-predict was going to happen, whether that's somebody saying something to you, off the cuff being rude, someone slamming on their brakes and almost hitting you, or you witnessing something pretty tragic. Those are all conflicts in terms of the definition. And so when we have a conflict that triggers, our biology has to send a response. It has to have a response mechanism that says, what are we going to do now? And so that tells us that there are two phases to this, right? We have the conflict phase where we're running, trying to look at responses, and then we have the healing phase. And so after this conflict happens, we have to have a response. It has to be a healing response when we figure out what happened. If someone says something to me about how I look, for example, and it shocks me and takes me by surprise, and I'm not able to digest that, or I'm not able to swallow it, or I believe that about myself and it really struck a nerve because someone said it out loud, what's going to happen is I start to process. I go into this conflict activity rate, and then when I find a resolution, maybe I say, oh, I don't feel that way about myself. That was silly. That's a response. That's a healing response. So I go into healing because I resolved this issue. Similar to if I'm almost in a car accident, I'm driving, I'm completely taken off guard. I almost hit the person in front of me. I slam on my brakes and I realize, oh, thank God I am totally okay. Nothing bad happened. I get home and I start to have some symptoms. I'm going into resolution. I was a conflict. I thought about it. I processed it. Now it's resolved. So think about those two phases. Then we have number four. Number four throws most people for a loop, and we're going to talk about that really deep rabbit hole today. And that is our perspective on germs or our perspective on microbes. So, under the biological laws, there is no microbe that is contagious, and there is no microbe that is going to take us under. Because if that was true, then everybody would already be taken under. We wouldn't be having this call tonight. So to think logically, right? We have to look at how logic applies in this situation. If one person has said bug and everybody's together and only three people get it, that doesn't mean the bug's contagious. It means that the microbe is doing something specifically for that person that is required and that the other people around them actually doesn't require because it's not being utilized. So it's essentially, if I'm helping somebody and they need my help because they're unable to do it by themselves, but someone next to them can do it by themselves, they don't need my help. Microbes work the same way. They only come in when there's a repair to be assisted in. And then number five, each program has a predictable pattern. A predictable pattern shows us that our body is a machine. It is. We have this, side of us, this spiritual side of us, this subconscious side of us. But when you look at it in terms of a mechanism, our body has a mechanistic breakdown. We could see that in Western medicine. We could see that in Eastern medicine. We could see that in holistic medicine, right? No matter how you look at medicine, that it looks at the body, there's always a pattern. And the key here is that physiology doesn't change. And so this is the quintessential essence of the five biological laws of nature is that if you are experiencing a symptom in your eye, it is only existing in your eye. It's not going to affect your big toe. If you're experiencing something in your reproductive system, it's completely separate and in its own casing, separate from your nose and your sinus passages, right? So we cannot look at this like we typically do when we fear medicine, when we fear our body, is we think we have all these symptoms and it means everything is broken and nothing is working. Instead, we can look at this and remove the fear and say, we have a predictable pattern here. We know that if someone's experiencing something in their sinus passages, it's related to this. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So my goal here tonight, beyond learning the five biological laws of nature is repositioning you in a place of truth, clarity, and liberation instead of being stuck in this fear paradigm, which majority of us are. Because here's the truth, I was programmed. We've all been programmed, right? TV, pharmaceuticals, we've been programmed time and time again. I don't care if you know the truth, if you're helping people with the truth, we're still getting that stuff absorbed because it's the old story. It's still being played out. We're the ones that are breaking this. So let's look at this old story versus the biological truth. The old story says something has attacked you, right? You caught this bug, or you've been taken down by this bug, or grandma had this, and so it's in my genes. I'm just destined to have it, right? Your body is malfunctioning, right? So people who have fibro, they feel like their body is completely shutting down. They're losing their strength. They're not able to get out of bed. They're not able to walk. They have fatigue. They have pain. They're experiencing all these things, and they just sum it up to you are broken. And you have this set of symptoms, so we're going to slap it here, and we wish you the best. And that, according to the biological laws, is completely untrue. Because every symptom follows a predictable survival logic pattern. So we have to look at what happened to that individual, because if everybody lived the same life, like we all live in the same community, we all live in the same household, but we all experience things very differently. And that is because our psyches are different. We interpret these conflicts very different from person to person, even from child to parent and from child to child of the same parents. I see it in my house all the time. We all see through different lens, but the patterns are predictable. So biological laws also states that no disease is mysterious because the body will never malfunction. It either adapts or it doesn't adapt. It doesn't malfunction because you have to look logically. If a machine is trying to work and it is not working properly, it's trying its best to adapt, right? We have something called innate intelligence, which makes us very different from the gear shifts in our car. We are a living, breathing entity. So we have this higher power or higher innate intelligence, if you will, light that runs through us, right? We communicate through frequency, through light, through vibration. That's how our cells communicate. And so that has a higher power. It's not going to malfunction. It's always going to try to adapt. And if we aren't able to adapt, then we cease to exist, right? And then we transition or we pass away, or however you want to look at that in your own definitions of what you believe in your own personal life. And so there's no such thing as a random chronic condition, right? We could all have experienced a lot of different conflicts, but we all look the same because we're experiencing similar conflicts. There's only a Rolodex this big that we could pull from, and then they start swapping these definitions of symptoms together and grouping us in different parties. So my goal here tonight is to look at the body as always responding intelligently, and then looking if we are responding intelligently, do we have the means in order to adapt? Do we need help adapting? Do we have vital energy in order to continue along that pathway, or do we not? And this is how it's very, very similar to when we look at a car. If you have a full tank of gas and then something breaks down and you have to fix that something, you have better chances of getting back in that car and driving. If you don't have gas, but your car is broke down, you have more things that you have to do. You have to put vital energy in the tank. And that's what we're talking about here. Do we have the necessary ingredients to our intelligence for us to adapt? So this is why chronic illness isn't just one problem. And it would be nice if we could all fit it into a box, but there's only, again, so many different categories that we can look at and compartmentalize ourselves as, because we're not looking from this aerial view of everybody has this dis-ease and everybody has to be the same. Because everybody, even within these diseases, has different presentations, but they still live in the same systems. And that's what I want to break down to shift your perspective on tonight. They're not individual biological programs, meaning that Lyme is not a program. And we're going to break these down to look at which specific biological programs actually make up these expressive health categories that have been subcategorized that don't exist biologically. It's a stacking of multiple unresolved or looping conflicts. So just like I explained in the biological law, you have a conflict shock that happens, you don't resolve it, and then you have another conflict shock and another conflict shock. It's like playing Jenga. not resolving. And then every time you have a conflict shock, your body's trying to resolve that conflict, pulling more vital energy out. So the next one is going to be more impactful, more intense, and more heavy on your body and your nervous system. And so now you see, and I think this is easy to see for most people, the chronic stress of work, the chronic stress of our modern day lives, the chronic stress of how we are trying to adapt in a world that is too fast paced for us as human beings. This is what has created this chronic illness problem. And so we're going to look at these labels and call them syndromes instead of diagnoses or disease because they're not disease in the sense of a conflict, right? We could have, a sinus infection, right? And that is simply a repair of our sinus tissue because we had an intense stink conflict. So the bacteria is coming in to repair the sinuses. As soon as the bacteria is done, the infection goes away. You have resolved it and you've returned back to normal homeostasis. That is not the case here. When you have something like fibro or a Lyme and you get that dis-ease slapped on you and you are told that's what is happening, you just added another layer of a tissue and a conflict because someone told you you're broken. And so now you're slapping these things together, and we are going to call them symptoms or syndromes for the essence of let's look at which conflicts they actually are, because not everybody who has these autoimmune issues or these big umbrella statement diseases all have the same experiences. And that's the one thing that is missing within that allopathic system. So, no biological program in nature is called Lyme or fibromyalgia. I just went over that. These conditions are the expressions of layers and not a single cause. But we're going to break them down to a single cause because if we have something we don't understand, let's make it simplistic. Let's look at which conflicts and organizations are there. So, the chronic loop cycle, I just explained a lot of it. You have this recurring conflict that triggers, right? So, let's take an example of your job, right? We live very modern day lives. So, maybe most of us have experienced a job we didn't like, a job that took us from family, a job that stressed us out, a boss that was hard on ourselves, made us devaluate ourselves. We grew up in families that devaluated us. We had lack of value for ourselves. We live this chronic loop of never getting out of that rat race of finding confidence or finding security or finding stability, whether it's in finances, whether it's in relationships. We have to look at these through real world eyes. And so these start building, and we have incomplete healing phases. So maybe a friend that degraded you or devalued you in childhood turned into the boss that devalued you, turned into your mother, turned into your father, turned into your husband, right? It continues to perpetuate the cycle. You never had a chance to heal that. And so every time you have an emotional reactivation of a trigger or a track that exists in that conflict, every time your nervous system can't get out of that survival mode because it wants to go in healing, but you don't have enough vital energy, this is the introduction to the chronic loop of dis-ease and dysfunction. So chronic symptoms means the body is trying to complete a program, but must get pulled back into conflict because it has no other way. It's like living in a place that you literally can't get out of because everything else in the walls are pressing down on you. So you just say, fine, I'll just live here. I can't see my way out. And that's what your nervous system says. So this loop creates years of symptoms that almost all of a sudden appear mysteriously because your body wants to heal. And this is key. Your body is intelligent. It wants to adapt. So it's always going to try to adapt. And 90 to 95% of the time, you are going to resolve most of the conflicts you experience. However, 5% of the time, you're going to keep yourself in these experiences unless you know the truth. And I tell everybody this when they run through my programs, when we do these calls, be tuned in to what happens in the next 24 hours because you probably, most likely, will have an increase in symptoms. I taught this class 2 years ago live. 50 people joined. By the end, I had 4 people standing because everybody went into resolution because it's just up here. Our brain is so powerful. It wants to adapt. You being here is so incredibly powerful for your body to resolve something tonight because now you are telling your subconscious that already works off the biological laws. I know what's going on. And so please stay tuned to what happens in your own personal life. Now we've gone over, this is 8, this is series number 8 or lesson number 8 of the series, I should say. I've never showed a diagram, but I felt like tonight was 100% necessary to show a diagram. So we've talked about this healing versus, or sorry, conflict activity versus healing. So I always talk about it being kind of like this heart monitor. So you are in normal tone here. So where your body functions, you have parasympathetic, you have sympathetic, you have fight or flight, rest and digest. That's what those are. You live in this state. You should live in most of the time parasympathetic state, not sympathetic state unless you're in conflict activity. Now, if you have conflict activity, You're going to go into a sympathetic state. So here's a conflict shock. Let's say you almost get in that car accident. Easy example. Now you're thinking, oh my gosh, my husband would have killed me if I wrecked my new car. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad my kids weren't in the car. Oh my gosh, I just can't believe I'm so thankful for my life. Like my life flashed before me, right? This is that phase, right? It's sympathetic. You're stressed, you get those nerve shocks, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that happened to me. Then you get home, you put the groceries away, your husband comes home, your kids are home. It's like, oh yeah, I'm so grateful for my life, but I forgot about it. You go into resolution. What happens is you need to have a healing phase. So healing happens in two phases. First phase is when your body starts to repair. It repairs anything that happened. And depending on our tissue and depending on what area of our body or our psyche determined where that conflict happened in our organizational system, we either had cell loss or cell growth during that phase of conflict activity when we're racking our brain. Depending on how long it is, how long it happened, how long it took us to resolve determines the intensity. And so let's say we had cell loss, for example. Now, all of a sudden, we are in this healing phase and we are going to have the opposite of that. So, you're going to have tissue restoration with bacteria. So, bacteria is necessary. It has to come in to restore that cell loss. You have to have the cells back. Your body wants to go back to normal. So, what happens here is now you require exudate, which is water or fluid. You require inflammation. And for a lot of programs, you require some type of heat. So, that's a fever. So, again, we think when we're sick, it's nasty and yucky and it's the worst and our body's breaking down, but it's literally the recipe for healing. And so when we have that healing cycle, it may go on for a day, a couple hours, a couple days, again, depending on how long this time was. And then you're going to spike. It's called the epicrisis when your body basically does like a quick trailer of the entire situation, zips up the bag, says, "We're done. We've cleaned up the mess." This is in the flu experience. This is when you throw up that one last time when you thought you were feeling better and you're like, "Oh shit, I just threw up one more time. Is this really coming back?" But then you right after that, you want to eat. You want to experience your guys going back to healing. This is return to normal tone. So that's what happens, right? When I say we want to experience a full resolution, that's what it looks like. One full cycle. That's it. Look at this picture over here. This is a hanging post-conflict phase. That means this right here, conflict, conflict activity, resolution, we should have returned back to normal tone, but we didn't. You see, we didn't return. We just went back into conflict activity again. So it's like a broken record. It's like you start to go into healing and then you go back to work and your boss made you upset or he cut your Christmas bonus or he cut your pay or you're not getting a raise. And so it's like every time you go back into work, you have to go back into this healing cycle. You have to go back into conflict activity. Then on the weekend, you come home on the weekend and you wonder why you flare up on the weekend. You wonder why you have symptoms on the weekend. Wonder why your back hurts. Wonder why you have anxiety. Wonder why all these symptoms come on. Then you go back to work. You go right back into this healing, this conflict active phase. So you never finish that cycle. And the goal is to finish one cycle as fast as possible in order to lessen the intensity and pull or strain on our vital energy. But if we constantly are hanging in this in-between phase, do you see how easy it is for our body to get tired and exhausted? And then we have other conflicts because we can't prevent conflicts from happening in life, but we have to continue to adapt to them. So let's look at this through the lens of each of these. So this would be, oh, let's let some new friends in. This would be Lyme through the 5 biological laws. So according to the biological laws of nature, on all of the conflicts or the programs that we have, the special biological programs that we experience, there's not one that is direct to Lyme because Lyme is made up of a conglomeration of multiple individual programs that are on set at the same time. Most of all are in a hanging conflict phase. So let's look at one of these. And again, this is where it gets to be a little bit deep. If you want to look at each one of these, I've done up to this point, for the most part, there's 7 other series calls on these individual conflicts themselves. So if you have one that you feel like stands out for you, if you're experiencing this type of health expression, go back and watch that one. Because the goal here is to reduce and resolve each of these conflicts one at a time so our body can be more adaptable. So a combination presentation to equal Lyme in terms of the Western sense or the medical definition sense would be muscle conflicts potentially. So that's self-devaluation, right? Muscle pain, you have muscle breakdown, you have discomfort, you have inflammation, you have all that fluid that builds up, right? We have that pattern running. Skin conflict, so this would be separation or attack conflict. We literally did an entire hour on this 2 weeks ago. And this could be anything from rashes to acne to deep layers of the skin. cysts, all kinds of things in the skin aspect. Then we have the nervous system. So the nervous system, if you tuned into that one, I think it was like week 2, the nervous system is always in this equation. It's who we are. It's like you can't separate the nervous system from the rest of our body. It's literally the meat and potatoes of the entire body. So it's how our body actually adapts. So if you are not in resolution or in regular homeostasis and you're in a conflict active state, literally nothing's going to heal. You can't take the nervous system out of a state of sympathetic unless it's actually going into healing. You can't do that. As a chiropractor, it exhausts me how many times I hear a lot of people in the chiropractic world saying, "Oh, you just need to balance and regulate your nervous system." Well, yeah, you could balance it for 5 seconds, but if you're running a track or a program, it's going to go right back there. It's wired to do so. It's wired for your safety and your survival. And then we also can tie into this aspect. I know of a lot of clients that I've worked with Lyme in the GNM world, that this is more of a seasonal or environmental. And so we could look at how we were up here. This would be something that happens all the time. But if you had a conflict that you experience during a certain time of year, let's say you lost a loved one in the winter time and you flare up in the winter time, it's because y'all we're connected to nature, right? Our body remembers. It's a part of that subconscious psyche. Our psyche protects us during these times when we experience massive conflicts. And so it wouldn't look like this. It would look like during the times that aren't connected to that track or that connected to that snapshot that the nervous system took at the time of conflict, you wouldn't have these things experienced because it's not making you remember. The amount of clients, animal clients, human clients who've had really big conflicts in their lives, who always have flare-ups or have some type of experience with their diagnosis or health expression during seasonal things is very, very common, especially animals. So there is no bacteria that causes Lyme. The idea that a tick bites you or you get some bacteria transpired, it just doesn't make sense because why, logically, if a tick's been in somebody, they don't express symptoms, but someone has a tick on them and they flick it off and they all of a sudden go into this massive Lyme presentation, it's not biological. It doesn't actually make, or it's not biologically from the actual microbe, essentially. It is from their conflict shock, right? I've had ticks on me. I've had ticks on my children, my dogs. Like nobody in my family thinks ticks are a big issue because we haven't programmed that to believe that. But those who I've had in my practice who have a tick on them and they find a tick on their animal and they freak out and they create this massive conflict, right? It's shocking. It creates a massive cascade of events, especially for a child or for an adult who has been ingrained into their brain that this is fearful for them. And so, yes, that bacteria is going to be present. So, yeah, you could take a Lyme test all you want, and there may be bacteria that shows up. But if it's showing up, it's because it's doing a repair process. That means you had a conflict in the subcategories of Lyme that make up the Lyme display in terms of the Western definition. And there's a bacteria that's there resolving something else. It's resolving a skin conflict. It's resolving a muscle conflict. It's not that that bacteria is there because if that was true, it would literally mean that everybody who touched a tick, looked at a tick, actually thought about a tick would just go down with massive Lyme symptoms. And that is fortunately, very fortunately, not true. This is how we unwind ourselves from this idea. And like it makes sense though. And I believed it too for years, right? I had this fear that you can't go out in nature. I have this fear that bugs are bad, that you can't hang around with people that have this quote unquote disease or sickness or illness because you're gonna catch it. But I remember very distinctively I went on a continuing education trip. This was probably like 6 years ago. I was on an airplane. Everybody got sick. Literally everybody. Everybody was throwing up. Everybody was throwing up before the airplane. The people I traveled with were sick. I sat next to them. I slept in the bed with a lot of these colleagues. Like literally, we went to this event together as chiropractors, and I didn't get sick. I didn't well, guess what? It's not because I just was immune to it. It was that I didn't have a program for that bacteria to resolve, so therefore it just resolved the programs it had to do the work for. It's like the janitorial staff. And so the same thing applies in the Lyme world. So when a conflict reactivates, symptoms then return, right? Because now we went from conflict activity into healing, and that may be misinterpreted as an infection relapse. And so that's how we work this cycle. It's like, oh, well, I had Lyme, I treated it, it went away, my markers were 0, didn't have it, and oh, it's winter time again, and I saw a tick and it triggered a track in my body, and now here I am, back to having the same infection phase. So this is the chronic loop. It's not based off a pathogen. The pathogen isn't the cause. The pathogen is the cleanup crew. It is the necessary repair janitorial staff that we all need in order to fully repair that process. We talked last week about how a lot of the time, if we don't have those microbes, especially with skin things, we can't resolve the program biologically. We could cut it out, we could remove it non-biologically, but we can't actually resolve it biologically because our innate intelligence requires that lock in the key, or the key in the lock, which essentially is the microbe in order to go and repair the process. Let's look at EBV. Same type of concept, right? We're working on the same biological laws. So we have profound exhaustion from prolonged conflict active phases, which you could have any type of conflict. And this is why EBV is very abstract, a lot of abstract, because there's only so many microbes that could repair various germ layers of our body, right? So we have 3 germ layers, depending on the specific germ layer and the area of tissue or the region of the body that it's the organ tissue. They will only have certain microbes that fit those keys into those locks. So EBV, again, I think, is just a catch-all for a lot of things. And so we really have to look at the person's symptoms because we can look at predictable patterns. If someone has skin rashes, it's a skin program. If someone has eye issues, it's an eye program. If someone has muscle issues, it is a muscle program, which is most of the time always self-evaluation. We only can look at the symptoms in order to determine the predictable patterns. So if we have repeated emotional overwhelm, we have a repeated drain on the nervous system, we can't have enough activation to repair anything. And this is where we have tissue repair mistaken for a viral activation, right? It's like, oh, well, if the virus is out, it's activated everybody. Not true. Not everybody with EBV diagnosis gets activated at the same time. It's not like someone flips a switch logically and everybody with EBV is just like buzzing, right? I know it sounds silly and I'm not making a mockery of people's actual symptoms. I know people suffer from these experiences. I've had my fair share of long-term chronic issues that I healed a long time ago and can look back and think, well, I actually didn't heal it. I just shifted this up here and my body was already wanting to adapt through it. So EBV is not this enemy virus. It's not something you have to get out of your system. It's something that's there when it needs to be a part of the repair process and will leave when it's done doing its work. So chronic fatigue is the final attempt of repair after long-term sympathetic overdrive. So think it's someone trying to, push through all this conflict activity with no vital energy left in their bucket. They're going to keep compounding conflict after conflict. And we see this. We see this in people who are chronically unwell, right? We have constant chronic issues being diagnosed and diagnosed and diagnosed because one goes into healing and then another one goes into healing and then they don't have enough vital energy in order to actually do the healing and then they get diagnosed with this massive chronic fatigue, this massive sympathetic shutdown, sympathetic disafferentation. This is when you have like your chronic issues such as those chronic pain reactivations, CRIPS, CRP, whatever it is, S. They have like 3 different types of classification for that now. We would just keep adding these things because our bodies are actually all very similar, very predictable patterns, but we all express them differently based off the conflict shocks we've experienced. So let's look at fibro. And I saved this for last. This is a pretty popular diagnosis channel that I have seen for like all of the 8 years of my practice when I was in there full time for 5 years. I saw it all the time, all the time. And everybody gets, this diagnosis from a sheet of symptoms that they have to check a certain amount of points, a certain amount of boxes, and then that gets the diagnosis. So instead, let's look at what conflicts make up this. For the most part, anybody with fibro symptoms has massive, intense self-evaluation conflicts running. They're either running, they're in a hanging healing, pretty intense. They stem from childhood, they stem from young adulthood, and they've constantly been expanded upon. There's micro tear healing phases within the muscles, within the fascia, within the ligaments, within the tissue of our bodies that keep our connective tissues that keep our bodies strong. And therefore, that is where you experience that pain and weakness. Of course, the nervous system becomes hyper aware because it wants to resolve the issue. Again, the goal is to resolve it, not to stay in healing or hanging healing or conflict activity. And then we also have this other aspect that comes in because we do have to talk about, the food isn't the cause of anything, but we do require minerals and resources and tools. And so if someone's constantly breaking down muscle tissue or connective tissue in some type of way, then they're going to be depleted of minerals, specifically like sodium and potassium, right? We require that. Physiologically, we are primarily salt and water. And so if you are constantly not having enough fuel in your fuel tank and you're trying to heal, what's going to happen? You're not going to have enough resources. And that's what we're going to talk about, the light and the vital energy tonight. So fibromyalgia is not random pain. It's multiple tissues trying to complete healing and as a widespread multiple programs running simultaneously. Autoimmune. And this, I could go on and on. We could spend 3 hours talking about each individual autoimmune disease or dysfunction, but we have to look at what is the section of physiology that we're talking about, right? We could talk about Sjogren's. My mom has experienced Sjogren's and a hanging healing for how old am I? Yeah, over almost 30, over 30 years. Um, so she's experienced long-term chronic loops of Sjogren's, and the longer you run the conflict, the less likely you are to able to adapt to it. And so this is something she will have for the rest of her life. She could change. She has moments where it's more intense, less intense, right? And then we have other programs that coincide. We could talk about things like, rheumatoid arthritis. We talk about juvenile arthritis. We could talk about any autoimmunity. The body is not attacking itself because nothing intelligent as we are as human beings will ever attack itself. Ever. What animal out in nature do you ever see attack itself? It doesn't. It doesn't exist. We don't attack ourselves. Our body is intelligent. Our innate intelligence is wise, right? We either adapt or we don't. It's not that we're going to malfunction or attack ourselves. And so we won't go down the big rabbit hole of the immune system because, we have this idea that the immune system is what protects us, but there are no programs that happen in the immune system because the immune system is not an actual physiological system. It is groups and pieces from other organ areas that connect and communicate to each other. And so if we look at this, there is no self-attack. If you're under an attack conflict, that's an attacked conflict of your skin or attack conflict of your functional aspects. There's no body confusion. Your body's not trying to be confused on how it's going to run biologically. It's trying to adapt. And certain biological markers, such as blood levels, mineral levels, those can tell us which phase you are in, whether conflict activity, healing phase, because again, if you had cell loss and cells have to grow, or you had cell proliferation and you have to break down those cells, that is the intelligence of the body. So there are markers, biomarkers that coincide with that, and that's where we look. And so if someone's experiencing hanging loops and has all these autoimmune numbers, it's because their body's bringing in a lot of inflammation because it needs to repair a lot. But if you're not able to repair it in a timely manner, what happens? Then you get chronic inflammation, and that is not great because you're not inflaming yourself in order to repair. You're just bringing in all of the resources and dumping them. It's like a painter coming in, painting your house and leaving all the paint everywhere, and you can't move back in. That's what autoimmune expression is like. So if we look at the autoimmune symptoms, we have healing phases that, of course, become misinterpreted, as I just explained. There's tissue breakdown, there's repair cycles. It literally looks like someone lit a match on someone's blood work. But if you look at it from a chronic loop of repeated conflicts and you look at each individual region of the body, respective of its physiology and how it functions, whether it's repair or cell growth, cell loss, what happens in the conflict active phase, what happens in the repair phase, what happens and which specific microbes come in, you can see clearly. We are just used to looking at something as a whole or super zoomed in. We are looking at aerial view or microscopic. We've missed literally the forest through the trees, everybody. We need to start looking at our body as it's organized biologically. So this is why people stay sick for years, because the goal is safety, repair, and release. We've said that every single week so far. So chronic looping happens because of emotional tracks. It happens because of never identifying the original conflict shock because someone else has told you you have this disease. And so you accept it and you move on. And that in and of itself is its own conflict shock. The second you get a diagnosis, you tank your vital energy and you have just welcomed yourself a new conflict. And so now you're just bundling and snowballing these conflicts all together. Definitely not even minding the fear that comes in with that, right? So if we have a fear and we have misdiagnosis, that happens a lot too. Well, we took your blood work and we think it's your thyroid. Just kidding, it's not. It's your pituitary. Just kidding, it's not. It's your adrenals. Just kidding, it's not. It's actually your stomach. Just kidding, it's not. It's your spleen, right? We go through these cycles and every single time you get a conflict, do you see why people are chronic looped to the max in this phase of life? Because we're so quick to look up something on Google, not trust physicians, not trust someone who actually has the intelligence to able to look at this. And even if you look at it through whatever medicine lens you're looking at, allopathic, Eastern, holistic, the biological aspect, we're all looking at the same coin, just with a different perspective. And so if we're able to start to remove the fear, there have been times where I've known a conflict is going to resolve and it's going to have a massive intensity, such as a febrile seizure with my own child, and I monitored it. Because that's important, because I wanted to make sure she had enough fuel in the gas tank in order to resolve that motor conflict. Because if not, I would need help. Because if our body's not able to survive an adaptation, we have a beautiful thing called allopathic medicine, emergency medicine that can help us. Same thing with a heart conflict, that would be a heart attack. Same thing with a stroke. That's a conflict, impending conflict resolution. And so if we have the knowledge and we throw out the fear, we could make clear choices and we could treat the healing phase as what it is and not with this massive amount of danger. We could have trust that comes into the equation. And I really believe that that would help us as a whole in the healthcare system work together, because we're not fighting over who's better. We're just respecting the biology of what that person's going through. And all of us are at the table saying, do we think this person has enough fuel in the fuel tank in order for them to adapt? Or what is our protocol for if they go down and their numbers look a certain way or they need this type of assistance and we feel like they can't adapt? That is what we should be looking at in the healthcare system, because medical fear keeps people sick. It's true. Fear anything in life. Fear losing your job. Fear not having money. Fear not being enough. Then add medical fear onto it. This is how we create this entire loop. So, the belief I am chronically ill, that's its own conflict in of itself. So, if you are experiencing chronic illness or you know somebody who is, it's time to make the choice to break the cycle. And that is the goal here, is that we have to find the freedom track, because you can stay on the same train all your life and never get off. Or you could simply decide that I'm going to look for a different train. And that's all I'm asking. If you send this to somebody, they're watching the replay, you are in a chronic loop, please get off the train. And it's as simple as literally choosing. No one is giving you a protocol. No one's telling, like, make a conscious choice. I'm choosing to get off this train. I'm tired of running this path. I'm tired of seeing the same scenery. I don't have a solution, but that's okay. I want to get off. Because you are now breaking that loop, and your body's now going to say, thank you, because now I could look for a resolution. Now I could see with a different set of eyes. Now I have this opportunity to have a completion of a healing cycle, and I could ask for support during the repair phase, right? Because most of these people, let's be real, are not helped. They don't get the proper help that they need because they're in this continual chronic loop of constant new conflict, constant new conflict. And so when they finally can see the light, they don't like to ask for help because they think every repair cycle where there's symptoms means they're going back down into the trenches. And so chronic symptoms resolve when we finally resolve the biological program. And again, if you've been running this for 20 years, it might take you a couple of years to resolve it, because time of conflict activity is always equal to time of healing. But we have this beautiful thing called our brain that we could downgrade, we could, I'll say, speed up for lack of a better term. We can shorten how these programs run in our body based off of what's happening up here. It's all based off choice, literally. And I know it sounds so crazy and so simplistic, but you have to make a choice for the first time to heal. That's it, literally. I'm choosing to heal. This is why people will choose to do a drug or choose to do an over the counter or an herbal or something, and they take it and they feel instantly better, right? It's because they made a choice. That's the whole placebo effect in and of itself, right? It's like we are the placebo. We are the placebo. Our bodies or individual case studies, we are the placebo. You could change something so quickly overnight in your mind and shift your identity into something else that your body will catch up to it. And you'll have to go through those symptoms and you'll have to experience that. And that's why, like I said last week, you could get into a car accident, be in chronic pain, and that force from that car that hits you can actually be utilized for a positive purpose in your body and utilize that force for good. Or you could get into a car accident, have chronic pain, be worse, or have no pain, get into a car accident, absorb that force deconstructively instead of constructively, and be worse than you were before. It all has to do with how our body is perceiving its environment. So let's talk about shifting this massively. I know I said this might run a little bit over because I wanted to make sure we covered this in an extrapolated depth different than the other ones, because there's a lot of stuff here. So if you do have to get off, I promise I'll post the replay by tomorrow. But let's talk about how we can enhance this vital energy that I talked about, because it sounds like it's pretty important, which it is. If you don't have gas in your gas tank, you ain't going nowhere. And if you don't have vitality in your system in order to pull resources from, you are no better than the person who's not choosing, because you're choosing without the resources versus choosing with no resources, right? We have to have something there. And so over the past 2.5 years, I've been wearing these patches. I wish I had one. They're all underneath my shirt on the back of my neck because my baby likes to rip them off of me. Uh, so I started utilizing them, and there's a whole entire recording on this for my daughter. She introduced me to them through a pretty intensive skin conflict that she was experiencing. And so I started researching and looking into these. And then I started sharing them with people in my practice as well as people in my online healing ministry and helping them just fill up the tank of vital energy. So if you don't know, you'll know now. Our body is made of light, frequency, and energy. Our bodies, our cells communicate to each cell, to our organ systems, to our bodies, to each other, actually, as light beings. Light is the channel that we communicate on. It's like a radio signal, there's light, wavelengths of light. We are, at the bare minimum, cellular energy, and cellular communication is based off of light, frequency, energy, energetics, sound, vibration, all those fancy things. So if we break this down to the very, very root and we want to rewire this, how do we shift this? How do we shift our perspective? We are going to take something to treat our body. Because like I said, you could take a supplement and it might feel like it got better because you shifted your perspective. But what happens when you step on a track and now it's wintertime again after you lost somebody last year and you swore for 9 months out of the year that that supplement made it better and now all of a sudden it's back? That makes that supplement untrue at helping and resolving your problem. What actually happened is you went back into conflict activity because you turned off the symptom. You didn't resolve it, you turned off the alert system telling your body it needed communication to resolve. But what if we flip the script? What if we take something that can just enhance our vital energy and give our body, our beingness, our subconscious, our consciousness enough space, force, and energy to do what it already wants to do? That's the goal here. Because I've never found anything that we could put into our body that worked, that didn't just turn off conflict activity. And so I spent lots and lots of months, years at this point, on myself, on patients, on practice members, on those of my clients worldwide, looking at this. And so if we can enhance our own light, and here's the key, we can enhance our own light with our own light codes. Because our own body's intelligent. So what if we reflected that light back into inside of our body, much like a generator, and we had this opportunity to take this light that's already signaling outside of us because we emit light. We are infrared beings. We emit low-level infrared light. You've seen this on like crime scene investigation shows where they're looking for the criminals with the night vision goggles. They're looking at, all the UV light stuff. Like we are heat beings. We are living, breathing entities. You could see heat. You could see thermography. You could see that light. We have tools in this day and age to determine that. So we had to take this wavelength that we're already emitting and we reflect it back into ourselves. It's a power source. It gives ourselves gas in our gas tank. We're not treating the condition. We are looking for resolution. Again, 95% of the time, your body wants to resolve it. It's going to find that resolution without your conscious participation. So now what if we shift our brain out of fear and we move into believability and we remove fear and now we have ease and we remove this construct that we're broken, so now we have a lot more ease, we have a lot more space. We're not looking for how we're broken, we're not looking how to fix ourselves, we're just saying, oh, I'm making a choice to exist in another way that I've never experienced before. And now we add vital energy into that, we add gas in the gas tank, and now what happens? And so this little patch, again, it's on my hair, I'll take it off on the back of my neck so you can see it. This little patch, oh, my little filter, there you go, there you go. X39 patch. We're just going to talk about this one tonight. This is the one that everybody should be wearing. X39 utilizes your own light. Your own light activates a pathway to produce something called GHK, copper peptide. You have your own biological resources, your own biological variants. Your body makes its own things, its own ingredients, in order to keep itself regenerating, its own tissues repairing. So if you have more of this thing called GHK copper peptide, you get this opportunity to shift into a healing state when your body feels it's necessary and timely to, when it's safe, when there's proper resources to repair, there's more ease, there's more vital energy. And so this copper peptide is able to help you revitalize. And again, you're making it yourself. Like I always say, I love a home cooked meal, even though I do love some fast food sometimes, right? Everything in moderation. That's how our body feels, right? When it can utilize its own vital resources. And so this becomes a really easeful, natural, effective, and safe way to add something to your body without actually adding it. Because again, this is non-transdermal. The only thing inside this little patch, I wish I could, my little filter, there it is stabilized oxygen, amino acids, like little crystals, organic crystals that reflect the light back in. So think of like mirror crystals, stabilized oxygen, stabilized water, sugars, and there's nothing going into the skin. There's no crossing the blood-brain barrier. There's not a vitamin patch. There's literally nothing in it. It's just like mirrors that are reflecting your light back into your body to produce your own necessary biological variants to the degree that your body requires them. This is different than taking a supplement and being like, how much should I take? I don't know how much my body needs. Your body has the communication to determine that for itself. And so there's no contraindications because it doesn't matter what medications you're taking, doesn't matter what your body's doing, because it just needs more vital energy. So it's literally like putting free gas in the gas tank. And so now we have this opportunity to shift into a state of whatever our body wants to do. And that's where it becomes powerful because we see people. There are people who have one patch wonders. There are. I wish everybody could be one. But there are people who have longer healing processes that they would have never experienced before if they didn't have gas in the gas tank. And that's all based off of us, our innate intelligence, our biology, our physiological ability to adapt. So I want to share this a little bit more about this with you because this is not new technology. This has been around for over 20 years. And so, welcome to this phase of the world where we get to experience something we've never even known before because there's so much information out there, but we just can't learn it all. And so I'm glad that you're here tonight to be able to download this and have this in back of your mind to help people because this is revolutionary. This is life transforming. There's over I think that LifeWave itself holds almost over 200 patents at this point. But this is a technology that is literally shifting the way we understand healing. Not because it's doing the healing, because it's optimizing what our body already has inside of us. And that's the tool. There's literally nothing out there that does that. This is a patented product. This is something that will never be able to be recreated. This is something that has been spearheaded, was first created for our Navy SEALs in order to optimize their energy and their vitality and not to have any drugs or stimulants, uppers, downers, and to shorten the longevity that they had because they were such high intensive, high valued assets to the US government. So I want to share with you just a few things because I work with individuals all the time through different aspects, and there's a lot more patches that we could utilize to optimize different pools of vitality. I don't want to confuse you. I want everybody to start with X39. So X39 here, we could optimize to allow your body to produce its own GHK, which GHK has so many incredible functions. However, I just want to say this. If you had gas in your gas tank, but you didn't have windshield washer fluid and you didn't have oil, your oil change, you didn't have air in your tires, and you didn't have heat in your car and it's the middle of winter, and you didn't have, the ability to put things in your trunk in order to travel, in order to get more further than a mile with your car, right? These are all things that we need in terms of vital energy in our system. We can build something for you that optimizes vital energy in a way that we haven't had access to before. And so I invite anybody, no matter what you're experiencing, right? These are not treatments for symptoms. We're not treating, diagnosing, we're not doing any of that. We simply shifted our educational perspective to view our body as a system or a basin of vital energy pools and how could we optimize its healing potential. So I invite everybody to opt in with at least the Vibrant Health and Pure Vitality Kit because these opting them in and utilizing them at a certain cadence will optimize your vital healing in so many ways that you've never experienced before. I'm 2.5 years into wearing these. I still wear literally almost every patch throughout the week just to optimize my system because I am so preventative minded and I know that conflicts are never going to stop. I can't prevent a conflict, so I can't predetermine when it's going to happen, right? And so the same thing is true for my children. We utilize this as a tool in our toolbox. The three things that we always do, we always get adjusted for our nervous system and enhancement, right? Optimizing a light in our nervous system. We always wear patches. And then if we ever need support, we always optimize with frequency or homeopathy or sound therapy or some other type of communication that the body works on. Those are our top three, and they're non-negotiable. So I want to leave you with this. And look, I'm only running 3 minutes over, everybody. I want to invite everybody who was invited here by somebody, maybe because they love the patches and they wanted a different perspective, or maybe because they just genuinely love and care about you and they want you to make a different choice. I invite you to go back to the person that invited you here, if it was about the patches, and ask them. Ask them their story. Ask them to help you pick out which patches, get your order in for you. This is a perfect time of year to get started. And I'm going to challenge you. And I know they're going to all thank me for challenging you. We have to rewrite the root. We have to rewrite this, right? You just heard me talk for an hour about how this doesn't change in a day. And it shouldn't, because if you want to actually repair, repair takes time. So I am challenging you to 365 days of wearing at least X39. Ideally, you would opt into a vital health protocol. That's how all of my people, and I tell them up front because, you could eat a salad once a week, it's not going to make a difference. You can make a choice, one different choice a week, it might make a little bit of a difference. But if you put this on in the morning before you brush your teeth and you take it off at night when you brush your teeth, it's literally all you have to do. And you're tapping into something that is profound and beyond anything we've seen in our lives, in our lifetime, my parents' lifetime, my grandparents' lifetime, literally any lifetime that I think anybody who's still living has ever seen. It is that transformational. So I want to encourage you. I'm a disruptor, I'm an initiator, I'm someone who is going to make you get a little bit fidgety in your seat. Choose the shift because what else do you have to lose, right? So choose. Make the call to that person who invited you here. Invite somebody else to make the choice with you. Community is also the biological foundation of who we are, and we've gotten so far away from that in our lives. So if you make the choice and you bring someone alongside you and you tag them along, make that choice together and choose that your body isn't broken. The story is. The story that you've told is what's broken. And I know it's hard. It's hard to release the story because that maybe makes ourselves feel that our entire life that we've lived becomes untrue. But that is not true. You live that entire life to experience all the things you did now to get to the truth, right? So I have lived 1,000 lives in my 3+ decades that I've been alive. I've lived 1,000 lives. I've believed 1,000 different things. You always have the choice to choose something or not to choose it. So you could choose this and try it out and then choose not to choose it. We have that gift. We have that sovereignty. We have that affordability as being humans. And so when you make a choice, that is true freedom. Freedom happens when you understand your biology, when you understand that you have a choice, and chronic illness does not exist in nature. It doesn't. Look out in nature, right? Everybody freaks out about ticks and fleas and lice and all these things in the human world. But literally, no raccoon, no wolf, no fox, no bear is out there freaking out about their diagnosis because they're not getting one. Because they're living and adapting and moving forward in life. And you have that affordability and that opportunity too. You just have to choose to shift it. So even though you may be experiencing symptoms like me, I'm not sick. I'm resolving a stink conflict from I very well know what happened in my life. And it was pretty intense. So I'm resolving it. I have congestion, I have things flowing, I have mucus flowing. It's doing what it's supposed to do. I'm not sick. I'm adapting. And you are not sick no matter what your symptoms are, no matter what someone has told you. You are caught in a loop of believing that you're sick and believing that you were told what has to happen in order to resolve. It's all in here. So I invite you to decode yourself. Watch this again and again and again, and watch the other bioenergy series. If you need help outside of the patching world, you're welcome to book a session with me. I do one-on-ones all the time with people looking through the lens of the 5 biological laws of nature. If you don't have anybody that invited you here and you're catching this by happenstance and you want to join with me for patching, you're more than welcome. But if someone invited you here, go do the work with them. They loved you, they called you for that reason. You were on their mind, and there's always a purpose why we show up in the places we show up. I'm going to open up for questions now. So many fun comments. Thank you all so much. I think I'm losing my voice at the end of this. So powerful.